Hello. Thank you very much for those opening remarks, Madam Mayor. Let's give a big hand also, not only for Madam Mayor Levine Cava, but for my friend Mayor Valérie Plante of Montreal. Thank you. Bienvenue.
Oh, it's okay. Both are good.
Plante.
Okay. I can be Mayor Valérie, you're Mayor Danielle.
It's a great honor to welcome you, Madame Mairesse, here in Miami. You know, Montreal and Miami share so many things in common. I mean, apart from being eastern seaboard cities that are governed by two extraordinary women mayors, and that is wonderful. They're also two of the most diverse cities on the planet, and if you look at the percentage of Montreal citizens or Miamians who are born outside their native countries, who are born in other countries, it's extraordinary. And you know, both cities are multi-ethnic, multilingual, wonderfully diverse places. But also, they're cities that are ports, the great ports, transit, logistics. It's the heart of what these cities are about. I think you came into office very much with improving public transit as the core of your policy, just as connecting the communities of Miami-Dade County is really at the core of what your administration is about. So I want to kind of ask you how the sort of equity piece is important when you think about transit. And I think that is so important because, you know, more and more, what we do at CoMotion, it's not about improving transit for 1% or 5% or 10% of the people. If it doesn't improve living conditions for everybody, I think it's not sort of worth the. So would you maybe start talking about that?
Sure,
Mayor
absolutely.
Plante?
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Bonjour tout le monde. Very happy to be here. Madam Mayor, thank you for having me in your beautiful city. Yes, I have to say that when it comes to transportation, the first thing that comes to mind is that we're not all equal in the city when it comes to transportation. We don't have the same options. Maybe it's about who we are financially, but it can be also about neighborhoods. They're not served properly or differently based on their location. So inclusiveness is central when it comes to planning transportation for a city like the size of Montreal, and I'm sure for the size a city like Miami. And for me, when I took office, I decided to look at the entire map, which, by the way, if you haven't come to Montreal, we have this great network. We have a subway system. We have bus lanes everywhere. I mean, it's quite well developed. And we also have, I have to say, bike lanes, you know, reserved one. We have about 200, I wouldn't say kilometers, 200, yeah, about 200 miles of bus, not bus, but bike lanes that are separated and secure and great, where people actually bike for, you know, during the 4 seasons. And if you've been to Montreal, you know how cold and, you know, it's winter. We have a real winter. But the idea is that every time, whatever it's a bus line, a reserved one, where we had to take cars out of one street or to take some parking away to make a safe bike lines, it really serves the purpose of mobility, but from an equity perspective. And we just had a result, and I'm just going to end on this. We just had a big report from the public health authorities saying that everything we've put together, especially the bike lanes, actually contributes to minimize the inequalities between people, the youth versus the elders, the more privileged financially and the less privileged. Some of the neighborhood that used to be very kind of separated versus the central boroughs. So to me, we have to have that in mind, and this is where urban planning needs to be closely connected to any type of transportation planning as well.
Right. Daniella, do you want to?
Sure. Well, I want to remind everyone the 4 E's: equity, economy, environment, and engagement. And so I don't think we've done as good a job as Montreal at making transportation equitable and accessible, but we are truly working on it and getting there, and we have great opportunity to build right. But not everybody here, what did I say, not as logical. So we definitely have some headwinds as we move forward. Nonetheless, I'm very participatory, obviously engagement. We had the largest ever in the history of Miami-Dade County public participation process called Thrive 305. So please check it out, miamidade.gov/Thrive305. I think also thrive305.org. And about 1% of the population fully participated through surveys and real-time appearances, and we created 14 action plans. So mobility, very, very high up, transit, and affordability, right? And we know that that's a big affordability factor. So we have been able to change policy to create more density along our transit corridors. And very interesting, we were meeting with an Assistant Secretary of Department of Transportation at the federal level on one of our corridors, the North Corridor, to be developed. And you know, the federal government says you have to prove that you have ridership before they'll invest money. But we said, look, we didn't even have a corridor yet in the south side of the county, but development is booming on the South Corridor in anticipation. So I think, you know, maybe they'll be changing the policies, but certainly because the Biden administration is so committed to equity and resilience, we're very hopeful that we'll get some good ratings and get some good support. So our plans are certainly ambitious. Also, buses are the main public transit system. We have a metro rail, an elevated metro rail, but it doesn't go, you know, to most of the county. So buses are the primary factor. And we, with the support of a community organization, Transit Alliance, we had a very extensive multi-year program of public participation and designed what we call the Better Bus Network. Now, we can't find enough bus operators to move forward because of the challenges we're all having getting employees. So if you're interested in driving a bus, we have a job for you. We have a signing bonus. We can get you up and running. So we need bus drivers. We need about 200, right, Euless? Wow. Yeah, so 200, okay? And then we can get started. The thing about this Better Bus Network is it creates much more frequency on the critical routes without sacrificing really the ability to come from dispersed places, because we have low concentration, really. So it's quite a challenge, but it's all about equity because buses are the main form of transit. And plus we need choice riders, right? It's all about, getting the people who have a choice to really help subsidize the system for the others. So, and regardless of work schedule, like we don't go 24 hours on all our routes. And we know guess what? We're a 24-hour city now, right, everybody? You're up late partying, you know. As far as bicycles go, and I am a very strong advocate, obviously, of bicycle mobility. Certainly we have, now everyone knows being outside all year round is better for you than being inside. We've learned from COVID and parks and everything. But we are putting up, but we have struggles. I'll just be honest. We do have struggles about it. We put down those armadillos. Y'all know about armadillos? Kind of humps and stripes. They don't really look like real armadillos, but hey, we're getting resistance. That's separated. And then people don't want to give up space. So there's a lot of struggling. But we are partnering with a lot of our developers to be more transit-oriented. Again, the density along the corridors has been a really good move for us, and the reduction in parking requirements, although the city of Miami is on the verge of reversing that, which, hello, anybody here with the city of Miami? Really a disastrous decision. Please don't do that.
We'll talk about that later.
Okay, is that on the agenda? Okay, thank you.
You mentioned both resiliency, and I think I want to just turn the conversation a little bit to that very important subject, since increasingly over and over again our cities, especially our coastal cities, our cities on the water, are exposed to the extremes of climate change, flooding here in Miami. I mean, it's not a good scenario. So I wanted to, both of you look at this very, very closely. I wanted to ask you how you're thinking about this in the context of transit and mobility. I mean, carbon emission, transportation is the leading source of carbon emissions in our societies, and we absolutely need to cut that down. That is an imperative for everyone. So, Madam Mayor, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. We all know the same things, right? We need to act and we need to reduce our emissions. And like you just said, John, it starts with the biggest, the most emissions comes from transportation. So we need to take bold decision that takes a lot of political will, but also support from everybody. And I'm saying that from a perspective where even though Montreal, yes, we've move forward on many initiatives. The moment that we decided to take, to change one side of a road for a bike lanes, people were screaming, and I understand why. But change needs to happen. So I'm just saying that as an example. But ultimately, for Montreal, I've decided to base my decision based on facts. And on facts, and we need to reduce the emissions. And that's what I tell people when they say, well, I'm not happy, it takes me more time. I'm like, I get it. But at the same time, citizens ask us to make bold move for the environment. They ask us that. I don't know about you guys here in the United States. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing where people want to do their effort individually. But us, we need to make decisions for the entire communities. And when we talk about inclusiveness, when we talk about equity, how about we think about climate change from an equity perspective? It will be the same people that will be affected more importantly if we don't do anything, right? So for Montreal, I've took the commitment to reduce by 55% our emission by 2030. It's huge. And we're going to be zero emissions, carbon neutral by 2050. And we're going to reach that. We're going to reach it, but it's going to be tough. And transit is so important. And in Canada, we have the electricity, right? So it's not like we can cut on so many kind of the fossil fuel.
I think some people may not realize that Quebec and certainly your part of Canada benefits from an extraordinary richness in terms of hydro electricity. And that produces great amounts of very, very cheap electricity.
Exactly. So now we're getting in a place where, since this is already renewable energy, right, with the hydroelectricity, we need to make the big move with housing, how to reduce the emission, but mostly with transportation. So we got to do it. And again, if we're serious about this, and I believe, and this is why I was so happy to meet Madame Mayor, because mayors and cities, we're at the forefront of what is happening in our streets, in our neighborhoods. Flooding, we have flooding. Montreal is an island. We have flooding. So it's the same thing, maybe just a different climate, but still the flooding. But we're at the forefront, and I believe we have the responsibility to act and to push other level of governments, because we're not talking about finance, but that's what we talked about on the other room. Even though we are like, yeah, we're going to do it, ultimately we need also the support of other level of governments who are willing to pitch in terms of money, but also in terms of political will and saying, okay, we need to transform our city. So it's a big chantier, it's a big, how you say chantier, a big construction site.
Construction site, yeah.
But we have to do it because it's a society project.
Very good.
Daniella,
a big shanty, okay? Well, we are ground zero for climate change here as another coastal city. It's good to point out you're an island as well. And certainly Miami Beach is pumping and raising roads ahead of the rest of us, showing us some of those ways that we need to adapt. But I'm very proud that we do have a very forward-looking set of plans. We have Resilient 305, our climate change strategy that we've just updated, our sea level rise strategy, and we have the same goals, aggressive goals. But those are just not enough, which is what we were also talking about earlier. Certainly transportation is the biggest form of carbon emissions, and we do have the largest electric bus fleet on the eastern seaboard in procurement. Okay, good. That's great. And of course, our fleet in the county has been converting to electric. We're putting in electric infrastructure charging, not only for our public transit and our fleet, but for the public at various government sites, and incentivizing our private developers to join. I even got legislation passed that when I was a commissioner to make sure that new construction was built with the adaptation to electric vehicle charging in mind. So, we're doing, certainly on the transportation front, we're looking at an electric garbage truck, so on. However, buildings, as you say, buildings are the number 2 form of carbon emissions. We have an aggressive building 305. It's an building efficiency 305. So, we're doing those things, but and also creating mobility bikes as a non-carbon producing form of transportation, and walking, right? And by the way, we have a very high morbidity rate from transportation, right? We unfortunately hit a lot of people on the streets, and we have a commitment to get to Vision Zero, but we have to be super aggressive about it. We have a lot of careless drivers, none of them from Canada, of course. But we do have people from all around the world, and we have people distracted by their cell phones, and even with aggressive rules that took a long time to pass. So, I just want to point out that is another aspect
Absolutely,
of
an
the
important
problem.
one, and a tragic one. And it's the numbers, of course, are all have been going in the wrong direction over the last couple of years of the pandemic. So we absolutely have to reverse that. I think in closing, I want to maybe just turn the conversation to something that is somewhat overlooked, but it's an area where both Miami and Montreal, I think, are global leaders, and that is in terms of your port operations. Both cities are extremely important ports. Ports are vital pieces of our economies. I think what's so interesting about both Miami-Dade, Miami Port, the Port of Miami, the Port of Montreal, is how technologically advanced both operations are. I mean, they're just beyond world class. They're in another kind of stratosphere in terms of applying artificial intelligence to port logistics, etc. So I don't want to go too much into the weeds in that, but that's something I think that we have to continue to improve on. Certainly, these...
Right. If I could, I'm
Sure.
very proud. One of the things that we've done since I've come into office, which is less than a year and a half ago, is secured an agreement with all 6 major cruise lines. And we are the cruise capital, sorry, Montreal, the cruise capital of the world. So all 6 major companies agreed to move to shore power. And by 2023, we will have in place, we will have the apparatus in place to do that. And that is a huge benefit, not only in terms of reduction of carbon, but just the belching pollution in the air that has been, very distasteful. So proud of that. And just since you want to talk about how important it is, we are now number 1 in foreign cargo in the country. By the way, our airport is now number 1 in foreign travel in the country as well.
Yes, I noticed
So
that.
we have really, during this pandemic, upped our game with cargo, and we, in fact, put out a "we're open for business" message when the ships were lining up on the West Coast, not able to get in to discharge their goods, and some did take us up on it and came on through the Panama Canal, saving time and money to get to us. And we are looking at a huge application. Oh, this is hot off the press. A huge mega plan to build an inland port that would be 0 carbon emissions. And we're working at the port to have all electric vehicles, and then the port operations, continuing to be net zero.
That is such a great question, because I feel like since I've started to talk, I'm talking a lot about individual mobility. But we also have to keep in mind the entire logistic chain, right? Whatever it's about, the port, everything related to the delivery, all the trucks that are in our roads as well. And you're right, the Port of Montreal is in a place where we always think of how we can do things better, being very preoccupied by our emissions, and they are contributed to our plan as well. So that's great. They're a great partner. But I guess what I want to say is also how the doing wise mobility is so crucial. And ultimately, I find that if we're able to take some solo cars out of the streets, it's even better for the entire logistic chain. It permits, because Montreal is the entry point for all the Great Lakes, right? Going to Toronto, going to all the other cities on both sides. So if we're able to have less cars, having more options for individuals, which is also good for the economy, so people can work and travel, this is great. But if there's less cars, then it's faster, and we lose less money for all the companies being stuck in traffic. That's what I tell people sometimes from a business perspective. I'm like, let's take cars out of the street so your truck goes faster. But for that, we need to do it together, because if not, then everybody loses money, both, companies and the city also in terms of urban sprawl and everything.
Absolutely. Well, this is a fascinating discussion. I would love it to go on all morning because, one of the things I think that CoMotion also stands for very deeply is that cities can learn from one another, and it's very, very important to bring
Thank
city
you for
leaders
bringing
like
us
your-
together, really. Very
Thank you.
grateful.
Thank
It's
you.
like
Let's
the
have
first meeting, there's going to be other ones.
Let's have a big hand for Mayor Levine, Cava, Mayor Plante. Thank you so much.